The rain didn't just fall that evening in Oakhaven. It seemed to mourn. Inside the sterile, fluorescent-lit office of the city hospital, the air was so heavy you could taste the ozone and the antiseptic. Across from me sat two families, the Millers and the Hendersons. They looked like strangers, yet they were bound by a mistake that had just shattered 2 decades of reality. The lawyer, a man with tired eyes and a folder that felt like a death warrant, cleared his throat. He didn't need to say the words. The DNA results, stapled in neat, terrifying black and white, said it all. My parents, the people who raised me, weren't my parents. And the girl sitting across the table, Maya, with her soft eyes and quiet demeanor, was the daughter they could have actually brought home 15 years ago. My heart wasn't pounding. It was sinking. My father, a man whose hands were calloused from decades in a workshop, gripped his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. My mother was silent, her eyes fixed on the floor, as if she were trying to memorize the pattern of the tiles to keep from screaming. As the lawyer spoke of administrative clerical errors and legal guardianship transfers, I looked at Maya. She was staring at me, and for a second, I saw it, the mirror of my own hollow terror. We were two puzzles missing the same piece, and the world had just decided to force us into the wrong slots. But as the silence dragged on, a terrifying thought crept into my mind. What if the grass on the other side wasn't just greener, but completely unrecognizable?
Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.
My life with the Millers had always been a series of not quite. Imagine a house where every single object has a place, where the morning starts with a high-protein smoothie and a lecture on maximizing output. My father, Mark, was a marathon runner who woke up at 4 a.m. to train. My mother, Elena, was a tennis champion who treated the dinner table like a debriefing room for the day's performance. They loved me, I know that now, but they loved me like a project they were trying to perfect. I spent my days in the attic, hiding in the shadows of my own room, sketching charcoal portraits of faces I saw in the local park. I wanted to go to art school in Paris. They wanted me to secure a scholarship for track. I felt like a watercolor painting hanging in a gym locker room, vibrant, but completely out of place. Then there was Maya, living with the Hendersons. Their home was a beautiful catastrophe. The floor was always littered with sheet music, half-finished novels, and empty coffee mugs. Her father, Julian, was a jazz pianist who played at midnight. Her mother, Clara, a freelance writer who often forgot to pay the electricity bill because she was too busy lost in a character arc. Maya, however, was born with a soul that craved symmetry. She grew up in secret, hiding her meticulously color-coded planners under her mattress because she didn't want to hurt her parents' feelings. She loved the quiet, structured satisfaction of a perfectly organized closet. Yet she was forced to live in a house where the only rule was that there were no rules. When the news finally broke, the initial shock wasn't horror. It was a sudden, intoxicating rush of relief. It was the "I knew it" moment that had haunted our childhoods. We spent the next week talking in hushed tones behind closed doors, planning our great escape. We believed, with the naive certainty of teenagers, that all we needed to be happy was the right set of parents. The exchange happened on a Tuesday. It was a day of frantic packing and tearful, confused goodbyes. The lawyers had framed it as an experimental transition period to ensure the emotional well-being of the minors. My parents, my actual biological parents, the Hendersons, were waiting for me with open arms and a vintage record player spinning in the living room. They were everything I thought I wanted. They understood the soul of an artist. They looked at my sketches and didn't ask when I'd be doing something practical with my time. Across town, Maya was stepping into the Miller household. For the first time, she walked into a kitchen where the counters were clear and the schedule was pinned to the wall. She felt a sense of peace that made her want to weep. For the first 48 hours, it was pure euphoria. It felt like I was finally breathing after holding my breath for 15 years. I could talk about color theory over breakfast without someone asking me about my VO2 max. Maya could finally experience a Tuesday that looked exactly like a Wednesday. But then, the luster started to dim, like a mirror slowly fogging up in a cold room. The transition began to fracture under the weight of reality. In the Miller house, Maya was finding that while she loved the structure, she was drowning in the intensity of their expectations. Her new mother, Elena, didn't just want her to be organized. She wanted her to be a champion. She brought home a trainer, a nutritionist, and a list of extracurriculars that would have broken a professional athlete. Maya would sit at the dinner table, staring at a plate of steamed vegetables and a spreadsheet detailing her recovery time, realizing she had traded her freedom for a cage, just a different kind of cage. She wasn't an artist anymore. She was a variable that needed optimizing. In my world, the Hendersons were so emotionally available that they were suffocating. Every minor mood shift was a 3-hour therapy session. There was no room for me to just be a kid. One evening, I was trying to focus on a new canvas, and Julian sat down beside me, insisting we talk about the trauma of the transition for the 4th time that day. I just wanted to paint in silence. I realized then that my bohemian parents didn't want a son. They wanted an audience for their own philosophy. I missed the smell of the workshop where my father, Mark, used to tinker with his tools in silence. I missed the predictable, ironclad reliability of the life I had left behind. And then the phone rang. It was Maya. Her voice, usually so composed, sounded thin and brittle. "Leo," she whispered, Are you still happy?" The escalation became a quiet, daily torture. We started meeting at a neutral park bench, our sanctuary. We were two strangers who shared a secret bloodline, looking for the exits. One afternoon, while watching the sun dip behind the trees, I saw Maya crying. Not from sadness, but from a total lack of direction. She looked hollowed out. "They think I'm a machine," she said, her voice shaking. "They measure my life in heart rates and protein intake. I thought I wanted discipline, but I just wanted to be seen. And here, I'm just an asset to be managed." I looked at her, then back at my own hands, stained with charcoal. "And I thought I wanted creative freedom," I replied. "But I'm starving for something solid. I'm tired of drifting in their clouds. I miss the guy who taught me how to change a tire. I miss the person who, even when they didn't get my art, always made sure I had a seat at the table." We looked at each other, the weight of our teenage idealism finally crashing down. We had pursued a fantasy of belonging, and realized we had only succeeded in losing our sense of self. The lowest point arrived on a rainy Sunday, exactly 1 week into the transition. The social worker, Ms. Gable, arrived at the Miller house while Maya was there for a joint session. She was smiling, holding a clipboard, ready to document the successful integration. She talked about biological compatibility and personality alignment, as if we were stock options on a market. She looked at us. Maya with her dark circles under her eyes, me with my frayed nerves, and told us how wonderful it was that we were finally where we belonged. That was the moment it snapped. Maya stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the hardwood floor. "We don't belong here," she said, her voice quiet but piercing. "I don't belong in a gym, and he doesn't belong in a jazz bar. We belong to the families who actually tried to raise us." Ms. Gable looked confused, then annoyed. "This is an adjustment period," she insisted. "You just need to give it more time." But the truth was out. The adults had built a fantasy around our genetic code, ignoring the 15 years of love, frustration, and history that had actually formed us. As Ms. Gable insisted we stay, I looked at the Millers, the people who had pushed me to be better, even when it felt like they were pushing me away, and for the first time I didn't see enemies. I saw a family that had done their best to guide me, and I realized I was just as much a product of their intensity as I was of my own desire for art. The turning point didn't come from a judge or a doctor. It came from the silence that followed Maya's outburst. My father, Mark, looked at me. He didn't look at my birth certificate. He looked at my face, the face he had watched grow, get bruised, and change over a decade and a half. He walked over to me, his gait familiar and heavy. He didn't say a word. He just placed a hand on my shoulder, the same way he did after I lost a race. It was a gesture of ownership, not of blood, but of time. Then Julian, the man who was technically my father, stood up. He looked at the sheet music on his piano, then at me. He realized, in that sharp, painful second, that he couldn't play my life like a song. He had loved me for a week, but he hadn't raised me. The realization was collective and crushing. We weren't just swapping assets. We were tearing apart two homes to try to fix a mistake that was already ancient history. The realization hit the room like a physical wave. We were children, not specimens. The parents, both sets of them, looked around the room, and for the first time, they weren't looking at the other family with suspicion, but with a shared, humbling grief. The climax was raw. We sat in that living room for parents and two teenagers, and finally we stopped talking about science. We talked about memories. My mother, Elena, admitted she had been terrified that my artistic side was a flaw she hadn't known how to fix, and she apologized for pushing so hard. Maya's mother, Clara, admitted she had felt guilty for years because she couldn't provide the stability Maya clearly needed, and she had tried to compensate by being the cool mom. The tension was suffocating, the air thick with the weight of years of unspoken fears. We weren't debating DNA anymore. We were debating love. "We don't want to be corrected," I said, my voice finally finding its strength. "We want to go back to the mess we know." It wasn't about who was better. It was about who had earned the right to be our parents. We saw them crumble, not as perfect authority figures, but as frightened, flawed adults who had just learned the most important lesson of their lives. You don't choose your family at birth. You choose them every single day you show up. In the end, the legal system was slow, but the emotional resolution was swift. We moved back to our original homes, but everything had changed. We were no longer two teenagers living in not-quite worlds. We were two young adults who had looked at the alternative and chosen our own history. The Millers didn't stop being intense, but they started asking me about my sketches, even if they didn't quite understand the medium. The Hendersons didn't stop being chaotic, but they gave Maya space to build her spreadsheets in the corner of their messy living room. We were still us, but the walls between us had thinned. I realized then that family isn't a biological contract. It's a marathon, and the people who run it with you, through the sweat and the tears and the years, are the only ones who truly know your stride. As I sat in the attic, charcoal in hand, looking down at the quiet street of Oakhaven, I understood that I didn't need to be in the right home to be myself. I just needed to be with the people who were willing to love the person I actually was, not the person they thought I should be. And for the first time in 15 years, the puzzle piece fit perfectly, not because it was forced, but because we chose to keep it there. Family is not where you start. It is where you find the courage to be yourself.